Some people will do anything to avoid saying two simple words. I'm sorry. They'll argue, deflect, blame, and twist reality, all to protect something fragile inside them. It's not pride. It's not power. It's fear. Because for them, admitting they were wrong isn't just uncomfortable. It's dangerous. It threatens their identity, their self-image, their fragile sense of worth. To say, I was wrong, would mean facing the possibility that they are not who they pretend to be. And for some, that's unbearable. So they lie to themselves instead. They deny, deflect, and defend, not because they don't understand what they did, but because their mind won't let them feel it. Apologizing feels like falling apart. So they build walls instead of bridges and call it strength. But the truth is simple. Refusing to apologize doesn't make someone strong. It only shows how afraid they are of being human. The psychology of a non-apologist. For most of us, saying I'm sorry means admitting a mistake and moving on. But for some people, it feels like self-destruction. Apologizing threatens their identity because, deep down, they can't separate what they do from who they are. If they did something wrong, then they must be wrong. If they hurt someone, then they must be bad. And that kind of thinking doesn't just create guilt, it creates shame. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. And for a person with fragile self-esteem, shame is unbearable. So instead of facing it, they protect themselves with denial, deflection, and blame. It's not that they don't understand what they've done, it's that admitting it would shatter their already delicate sense of self. Psychologists describe this as ego defense. When the self feels threatened, the mind creates a barrier, a kind of emotional armor to keep the truth out. The non-apologist isn't always consciously lying. Often their brain filters reality to protect them from collapse. They convince themselves that they didn't mean it, or that the other person overreacted, or that the situation was unfair. Because if they accepted responsibility, they'd have to face a painful truth. They're not perfect, and that feels like failure. For them, control is safety. To apologize means losing control, surrendering power, admitting vulnerability. So they hold on tighter, even when it damages their relationships. They'd rather be right than real. They'd rather protect their ego than heal their connection. But behind that stubbornness isn't arrogance, it's fear. A fear of being exposed, rejected, or unloved. A fear that if they admit their flaws, no one will stay. So they hide behind pride when really they're hiding from pain. The roots: trauma, attachment, and insecurity. No one is born afraid to apologize. That fear is learned. For many people who can't say sorry, the roots go back to childhood, to moments when being wrong wasn't safe. Maybe they grew up in a home where mistakes were punished, where every fault was met with shame, yelling, or withdrawal. Maybe they learned early that admitting guilt meant getting hurt, so they stopped admitting. They learned to survive by being right because their inner child believes, if I admit I hurt you, you'll leave me. Psychologists call this adaptive defense. It starts as protection but becomes a prison. The child who once avoided punishment grows into an adult who avoids accountability. They carry that fear into every relationship, terrified that saying, I was wrong, will lead to rejection, humiliation, or loss. Attachment theory helps explain this even deeper. Those with dismissive, avoidant, and attachment styles often struggle with vulnerability. To them, closeness feels risky, and emotional openness feels like exposure. Apologizing is the ultimate exposure. It's standing naked in front of judgment. So they run from it. They tell themselves it doesn't matter, or that the other person is overreacting. But the truth is, They're afraid of being seen too closely, afraid someone might notice their flaws and decide they're not enough. Trauma can also harden the walls around the self. Someone who's been blamed unfairly or punished harshly in the past may associate apology with danger. In their mind, admitting fault means surrendering to pain. It's not about arrogance, it's about survival. And then there's insecurity, the quiet root that hides beneath everything. When someone already doubts their own worth, every criticism feels personal. Instead of hearing, "You made a mistake," they hear, "You are the mistake." Their defenses rise instantly, not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear of collapsing under the weight of shame they've carried for years. In the end, what looks like pride is often just a scar, a wound that was never healed, only hidden. And until it's faced with compassion instead of confrontation, it stays that way, a wall built to keep pain out, but which also keeps love from getting in. Personality and power, narcissism and control. Some people don't apologize because they see no reason to. In their mind, being wrong simply isn't possible. This is the psychology of narcissism, where the self is always right because it must be. To a narcissistic mind, mistakes don't exist, only misunderstandings caused by others. Never apologize. It's a sign of weakness. A belief of the narcissistic mind, not a strength of character. Apologizing would mean admitting imperfection, and that's something their fragile ego can't tolerate. At the core of narcissism is deep insecurity masked as superiority. Beneath the confidence is a constant fear of being exposed as flawed, so they build a wall of perfection and guard it with pride. When faced with blame, they react with anger or mockery, because it's easier to attack than to feel shame. They can't say sorry because sorry cracks the image they've spent their whole life protecting. Power also plays a role. People in positions of authority in relationships, families, or workplaces may avoid apologizing to maintain control. To them, saying, "I'm sorry," feels like stepping down from their pedestal. They fear that one moment of humility could make them look weak, so they choose domination instead of vulnerability. They use silence, manipulation, or emotional distance to keep others beneath them. It's not about truth, it's about power. This mentality often starts early, what psychologists call the moving against orientation. It's the belief that the world is a battlefield, and the only way to survive is to win. These people learn that domination keeps them safe, that control equals strength. Apologizing then feels like surrender, something their worldview doesn't allow. But the tragedy of this mindset is loneliness, because when you refuse to bend, you eventually break, not outwardly, but inside. The constant need to appear strong isolates them from genuine connection. They can't be loved for who they are because they never show who they are. They live behind an armor that keeps them invincible, but also untouchable. So while the narcissist believes an apology would make them weak, the truth is, their refusal to apologize is what truly keeps them powerless, a prisoner of their own ego, trapped in a war they can never win. The emotional cost. There's always a price for refusing to say sorry. It's not paid in arguments or lost pride, it's paid in distance, loneliness, and silence. He who refuses to apologize chooses loneliness over love. Every time someone avoids an apology, a small piece of connection dies. At first, it looks like strength, calm, collected, unmoved. But beneath the surface, there's tension. Unresolved guilt becomes irritation. Unspoken truth turns into emotional distance. Over time, that distance hardens into isolation. People who can't apologize often end up surrounded by people who no longer try to reach them. Friends pull away. Partners stop opening up. Family members stop expecting change. Eventually, the non-apologist becomes trapped inside their own narrative, the story that they're always right and everyone else is unreasonable. It's a comforting story, but a lonely one. Psychologically, this refusal eats away at empathy. When you avoid guilt for too long, you lose your sensitivity to others' pain. It becomes easier to justify harm than to heal it. What started as self-protection becomes self-sabotage. They think they're saving face, but they're really losing relationships. And inside, the cost is even greater. That same shame they're running from doesn't disappear. It grows stronger in the dark. It turns into quiet, self-loathing, irritability, even depression. Because deep down, they know the truth. Their refusal to apologize hasn't made them safe. It's made them alone. They start to live in a constant state of emotional tension, craving closeness, but terrified of vulnerability. They want forgiveness, but can't ask for it. They want connection, but can't risk exposure. It's a cycle that feeds itself. The more they refuse to face their faults, the more disconnected they become. And the more disconnected they become, the harder it is to ever say, "I'm sorry." In the end, refusing to apologize doesn't protect the self, it erases it, because without accountability, there can be no growth. Without humility, there can be no intimacy. And without forgiveness, both given and received, there can be no peace. What you can do. You can't force someone to apologize. Some people can't say sorry because they never learned they could be forgiven. No matter how much you explain, reason, or plead, if their mind sees apology as danger, they will protect themselves before they ever admit they're wrong. So the first step is to understand it's not your job to fix them. When you're dealing with someone who refuses to say sorry, you need to protect your peace. Arguing with them often leads nowhere. They'll twist your words, deflect the blame, or make you doubt your own reality. You don't win by proving them wrong, you win by not letting their denial pull you under. If a conversation keeps looping in circles, step back. You're not giving up, you're choosing calm over chaos. Engaging with a person who's psychologically unable to apologize will only drain you. Sometimes, silence is the strongest response you can give. That doesn't mean you should stop feeling or caring. But you can learn to stop expecting what they can't give. Instead of waiting for the words, "I'm sorry," pay attention to small signs, a softer tone, a change in behavior, a quiet gesture. Some people show regret in actions that they can't put into words. But remember, understanding someone's pain doesn't mean accepting their disrespect. Empathy should never cost your self-worth. If their lack of accountability keeps hurting you, it's okay to create distance. Boundaries are not punishment. They're protection. You can't teach someone emotional maturity by sacrificing your own. The best you can do is lead by example. Apologize when you're wrong. Own your part. Show that strength isn't in perfection, it's in honesty. When you stop chasing their apology, you free yourself from their control. You reclaim your peace, your energy, and your dignity. And sometimes, that quiet act of walking away says more than any words ever could. Final reflection. Some people never learn to say sorry, not because they don't care, but because they were never taught how to face themselves. For them, apology feels like shame. Accountability feels like collapse. They protect their pride because they believe if they let it crack, they'll disappear. But the truth is, apology isn't weakness. It's courage. It takes strength to admit you were wrong. It takes self-respect to take responsibility. And it takes emotional maturity to value peace over ego. People who can't say sorry spend their lives trapped in invisible battles. They fight to be right, even when it costs them love. They hide behind a fence when what they really crave is connection. They lose relationships, trust, and intimacy, all in the name of protecting a self-image that was never real to begin with. If you've ever dealt with someone like this, remember their silence isn't your fault. Their refusal to apologize says nothing about your worth. You are not hard to love just because they can't face their own guilt. You are not too sensitive because you expect accountability. You are simply human, and being human means wanting honesty, closeness, and respect. And if you see a little of yourself in their story, know this: it's never too late to change. Apology is not about losing face. It's about finding peace. It's about releasing the weight of pride and choosing to heal instead of hide. Because the moment you say, "I'm sorry," and truly mean it, you stop being controlled by shame. You stop running from yourself. You begin to grow. In the end, sorry isn't just a word. It's a bridge between guilt and forgiveness, between isolation and understanding. It's how we say, "I see what I've done. I see who I am. And I choose to be better." And that choice to see, to admit, to change, that's where real strength begins.